This is Michael Bryan. Welcome back to another great leadership talk. We're today with Joe Powers, Deputy Chief on the East Coast with some pretty strong specialties in community risk reduction, but has just a fascinating background and extremely passionate about the fire service in what I would say is probably one of the most impressive CVs that I think I've ever put my hands on. But Joe's one of those guys that is getting it done in so many different arenas. When he jumps into something, I've had the chance to work with him in the fire and life safety section and a bunch of other areas. He's all in. So today we're going to have a great conversation with Joe and, hopefully dive into some leadership nuggets. I think that's a term that keeps coming up that people say they like is the term leadership nuggets. But how are you, Joe?
I'm good, buddy. I'm looking for that $20 bill that you said that I owed you if you said really nice things about me. So yeah. I can't find it. I'll just stay by the mailbox. It'll be there in a minute.
Yeah, so I think I met you in town. We were in town teaching or something with the chief in Henrico. I think was the first time I had a chance to meet you. But how long have you been in the business now?
So I started with Henrico County as a professional firefighter back in August of 2000. I was a volunteer in high school when we first moved to Virginia and all through college because college, if you were a volunteer, you could get a car on campus as a freshman.
Oh.
So yeah, it worked out well.
All right. So for those people who don't know, Virginia is a little different, I think, in the fire service than other states. And what I mean by that is you have a lot of county fire service, and then you have the cities or incorporated areas.
Yep.
Walk us through that, because I think for a lot of people, right, they know of counties, right? We see counties or authorities, districts, but I've found Virginia's a hair different.
Yeah, so Virginia is a commonwealth. So, there's several other commonwealths, but essentially we have no unincorporated areas that we don't provide fire protection to. So the cities and the counties are completely different. So right now I'm working in the city of Charlottesville, and it's a 10 square mile city in the middle of Albemarle County, and we're two separate governments. Albemarle County covers, like 700 square miles. It's pretty large. Don't quote me on that at all. But like Henrico County was 244 square miles, and there were some very rural areas that in other states would probably be unincorporated and not have any direct fire service coverage. But the way that we operate is we either operate in a county or a city, and there are no authorities or special districts or anything like that.
All right. So growing up, what was life like for you? Were you into sports? What was your
So I moved around a lot. I was actually born in Florida, and then shortly after that moved to Alaska and spent most of my childhood years in Alaska. I know it's kind of cold there and dark in the winters, and then spent a little bit of time actually right down the street from where Greg Rogers lives in Spokane Valley. And then when I got into high school, probably middle of high school, I moved to Virginia, and there wasn't, rural Virginia, there wasn't a lot for new kids to do. So I fell into the fire service, and even the rescue squad, just to, I found it, I don't know if it was a calling. It was something that I really needed, and it worked out really well for this high school kid. And that, pushed through college and then got me a job when I got out of college.
All right. So I was like I think I gave my mom a lot of heart attacks in high school.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't say I was a bad kid, but when it came to grades, and I'm paying it right now, right? I've got a senior in high school, and Elliot does a great job of keeping me on my toes. I think as a parent, it's payback, right? I think, how were you in school?
So I did, it's really funny. So I actually went to Catholic school almost my whole life, because my mom was a teacher, and my sister is 18 years older than me. So there's a big gap, or, I was an oops or something like that. My sister went to Catholic school her whole years, and my mom always taught in Catholic school. So I did the exact same thing. I am not Catholic, but I know just about everything there is about Catholic folks. And when I moved to Virginia, was the first time I entered into public school, and I realized that there's a big difference between the two different schools. And I did really, really well my first year in public school, and then it kind of all went downhill after that. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. But I did graduate, and I got waitlisted into James Madison University, and finally made it into college. And did mediocre all the way through college, like any I think any guy, at least from my friends group, we all didn't do awesomely in college, but yeah, not as good as my roommates. So my roommates were super smart.
Were they?
Yeah.
So if you didn't end up in fire, where were you going?
I wanted to be a doctor.
Oh.
Yeah, until I took chemistry, and then that went downhill really quickly. Yeah, I think I changed my major like 8 or 9 times in college, and it became a joke after a while that going to my counselor or advisor, whoever it was, and saying, hey, I think I want to change again.
Yeah, that's if you change that many times. I was construction management, and then
Okay. Well,
ended
that
up.
still aligns a little bit with what you do.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So I ended up with a health sciences assessment and promotion and program planning degree for essentially like for corporate health, to developing exercise programs and health stuff.
So your mom being a teacher, were you a big reader growing up? Did you
I was
read a
not.
lot?
No, I'm horribly dyslexic, and I still am as an adult. And I don't. I like to say that I read a fair amount of books, but when I compare it to my kids, I don't, because my kids are avid readers and they read just about anything. And I did not read very much. I remember getting in trouble with my mom because we went to the library and the first thing I did was look at the back of the book to see how many pages there were. And then I lost my ability to choose my own books after that.
Yeah. How many pictures I'm just laughing because, right, I like books on tape. It helps me consume. I've always tried to, probably within the last couple of years, I wanted to read like 12 books a year. And if it wasn't for books on tape, I wouldn't make it. I think half the time I sit down with a book, I probably lean towards like self-help business.
Yeah.
I like this idea of reading one book on all the presidents, but those are some long books.
Yeah, they are.
Especially when you look in like a George Washington book or something.
Yeah. So I drive my commute back and forth from I live in the Richmond area and commute to Charlottesville, and it's about an hour. So I get a lot of books on tape time, in the mornings, and then on the way home it's always phone calls. But I took I take the fact that I don't read very fast, and I get easily distracted, and I dump that into the way that we communicate as a department with our firefighters. Because I developed this theory that most firefighters don't read past the second or third line. So I use this short and long method. Short is only 2 sentences. It tells exactly what it is. And it hopefully gets the point across. Long is all the details that we would typically send to our department. And it's really funny because everybody's like, oh, I love the short and long, but it really pisses me off because I always end up reading the long, even though I didn't want to. Yeah, that's worked out well for us. And from a picture standpoint, when you said something earlier, we play the kitchen table game with a lot of the documents or the visuals or the graphs or the stuff that we're using. We're going to put in front of the council, or we're going to put out as a public engagement piece of media. I'll throw it on the kitchen table of a firehouse. I'm like, hey, tell me what this says. And if it's not exactly what I intended it to say, it's not going to get the job done. And we either probably just need to simplify it, not saying anything bad about who sits around a kitchen table in a firehouse, but that's our audience. Is we're trying to get the folks that that aren't going to pay a whole lot of attention to something that they don't care about, but they're going to consume the information.
Yeah, firefighters will definitely give you feedback, especially if you can bring them some fresh coffee,
exactly,
donuts or something.
Yeah.
So, how was Fire Academy for you? Like, I was a night academy guy. I wasn't, I went to night academy, and then how did I do paramedic? Paramedic was nights as well and a bunch of long weekends. But what was Fire Academy like for you?
Yeah, so my paramedic academy, or my paramedic school, was actually in Charlottesville, where I'm working now, and it was at the University of Virginia. So we kind of come full circle. So in the late 90s, I took my paramedic. I had convinced the counselors or the advisors at the university I was going to that that I should get credit for things like this. So I started writing a lot of my own curriculum. Like, hey, paramedic school would give me at least 4 credits. So I got, I don't remember how many credits I got out of it, but that was all nights and weekends, and driving from Harrisonburg to Charlottesville, which is about 45 minutes in the evening. So I did take a lot of naps on the side of the road. That's probably where I first started to understand how what a 10-minute nap can do for you. The academy for us was, we're Henrico County is a large metro-sized department. Right now they're still running about 2 academies a year for about 22, 25 weeks. I don't remember how long they're just under 6 months. So my academy was almost a 6-month academy with, I think, 24 people in it. And I thought, going into it, I knew everything I needed to know. And it was really nice to find out at the end that I didn't know as much as I thought. And, they did a really good job. And, I still, probably those are the folks that I have the most connections still with, that I can tell the most stories with. I don't get to see any of those guys anymore. But it was, we were together and we did some cool stuff for 22 weeks. We made a lot of fun of each other and played practical jokes on everybody. But yeah.
It is amazing what memories I think we all have, right? A pure fire chief in a couple towns over. We both went to paramedic school. We tested against each other all over the place. And right, those stories always come back from.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny. One of my colleagues was actually, she and I went to paramedic school together. And she was a firefighter in the city of Charlottesville. And, I hadn't even started in the professional side of the fire service. And, now we're working side by side. So that's really neat.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you did some time as a firefighter paramedic then in Henrico.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How was that? I mean, is that a busy, how many stations?
So Henrico County is 21 stations now, I think. I'm running about 55,000 calls. When I first came out of the academy, I went to a firehouse that, because I was a paramedic, I went to a firehouse that had a brand new medic being placed in it. Far west end of the county, a super slow engine company, a super busy ambulance. And I was really, I was excited to run the calls, but I was looking for something a little bit different. So I spent about a year there before they moved me into a busy engine and a busy ambulance house. And really that's kind of where I stayed for my entire career. I spent half my career in operations, running out of Station 9. But it was sporadic because I would spend 5 or 6 years here, and then I would go and do, that you said something about you think that my CV is relatively impressive, and a lot of that came out of, me looking for something a little bit different, and, running a lot of ambulance, running a lot of 3 a.m. calls on an ambulance was, can get to you after a while. So I knew that there was an opportunity to be an inspector or an investigator doing strategic planning or accreditation or, program development. So I started jumping on all of those opportunities. And, I always tell people, I was like, there was a guy and I call him an old captain. He is not that much older than me, but he told me when I first got started, he's like, he said he picked up a gentleman from the airport that was going to be a speaker at one of the conferences that we were doing. And he said, the gentleman told him, he's like, hey, listen, the fire service is going to make you into 2 things. It's going to either make you a really good storyteller at a bar, or it's going to teach you what you need to know to have a long career in whatever you want to do, right? It's going to make you use your brain. It's going to do all this stuff. So never pass up a good opportunity. And so my first question is like, well, how do you know what a good opportunity is? And, he's like, well, you don't. That's why you just take those opportunities when they get in front of you. So yeah, that's kind of that's how I got into most of the stuff that you see on that CV is me taking opportunities.
Yeah, I don't, that's some pretty good advice from a captain. I think mine was, hey, if you want to influence change, you got to show up. And then, that even morphed up like, hey, if you want to influence change, you got to be the first person when somebody needs help with something, step up. Right. And I think it was CPR instructor was one of the first things I took on in a fire department, working as a firefighter, EMT or firefighter paramedic. And I'm like, I'll be an instructor.
Looking back, there was a lot of those opportunities that I'm like, wow, how did I get into that? So, yeah.
What did you find challenging? What did you enjoy working in what we would call fire prevention?
Yeah. So what I always tell people, I said that, the first 6 months of any job that's not riding backwards on an engine company, the learning curve is about this steep, and you start to realize how much is behind those curtains that you have no idea what's going on. So early 2000s, I'd been in operations for probably only 3 or 4 years, and I saw an opportunity to be a fire inspector. So I went out and I got my 1031, and I started doing fire inspections as a full-time job, going back to a 40-hour work week. And I found that I really like sleeping at night, so that was interesting. And it wasn't. I probably spent, I don't know, maybe a year or so as an inspector. Before I saw, they opened up applications for investigators, and we do full law enforcement investigators. So I got to go to a police academy and all of that. So that was a lot of fun. But it's all of the stuff that firefighters typically don't see because they're exposed to it. And that's the stuff that I always try to push people to. I was like, it's going to make you feel uncomfortable, and it's okay to be uncomfortable. You just got to put yourself out there, because there's so much more to this fire service than just riding backwards. Really in 2003, either 2003 or 2004, I developed what we called the Fire Prevention Associate Program, and it's a horrible name now that I think back at it. But what we had done is we had reached out to all the big box stores, the Lowe's, the Home Depots, the Sears, that was when it was around, and started training their managers on fire code, especially the things that we were continually seeing. And we would give them a sticker and a mug and some other stuff and a little certificate for their wall. And we did it quarterly, and we put a lot of managers through those programs, and that really reduce most of our reasons and our first time violations in a lot of those places. And when you think back, like, well, that was community risk reduction, and we just didn't know that what it was. We were matching a program that we had identified, and it worked out really well. But we didn't know that we didn't know that was community risk reduction. But yeah, I mean, everything back then was called fire prevention, and we were just looking at really preventing fires and never really taking that next step, down the road where we are now today.
Yeah. So fast forward, right? Did you officially retire from Henrico, or how's it work out in Virginia? You kind of just.
Yeah. Even though I look really old, I'm not that old. So no, I didn't. I actually, I left it just under 20 years, 19 years and 8 months, I think, is what I left Henrico. And I went back. One of the things that allowed me to do that is another old firefighter guy told me right when I got hired. He's like, put as much money away into deferred comp as you can. If I could ever talk to every new firefighter, I was like, dude, do that immediately, because all of the men and women that are starting now have got to plan for the future. And that's what allowed me to be like, you know what, I can walk away from this right now. Walk away from Henrico County and take the job that's about an hour down the road. It was a brand new position, in community risk reduction. It's a city government rather than a county government. It's almost completely opposite in every single way. Big metro department ish, 600 people, to the city of Charlottesville, which was about 104 people when I got there. We're about 115 now. So yeah.
Wow. So, all right. So I'm sure some people watching this understand what community risk reduction is. Some people think they know what community risk reduction is. Some people overcomplicate CRR. So in your best terms, right, if you're giving that elevator speech to a peer fire chief, why they should hire somebody like you, what is CRR?
Yeah, so it's matching programs and services to the community need, right? It's all through public engagement and community partnerships. I speak a lot on community risk reduction, and the two things that I speak on most often is the side effects of community risk reduction. So that's the increase in our overall efficiency as an organization and the decrease in our workload. Because if we start to take this pill, right, if we're going to take the blue pill and we're going to jump onto community risk reduction, we're definitely going to see impacts in our organization, and likely it's going to show increases in our efficiency. And now we're not working as hard as we were before because we're matching the right programs with the right the right programs and resources to the community need, rather than just saying, all right, we're going to push it all out in the community and do it this way. But a lot of it really comes down to partnerships, and that was one of the other big side effects is these public partnerships that you cultivate. And if I could buy flowers or coffee, I buy coffee with somebody probably twice a week, and develop these partnerships and start having these conversations. Because a lot of I've got a great fire marshal's office in the city of Charlottesville who does code enforcement investigations, and I've got a great operational staff of almost 100 people that do great community risk reduction. However, they don't know that they're doing community risk reduction, and that's kind of what we're working toward. The other thing that I always talk about, in a lot of the conferences is I call it. I use Mike Tyson in NWA, and I have it's called community risk reduction. Don't believe the hype, because everybody believes that community risk reduction is the fire marshal's office. They think it's code enforcement and public education, and it's not. And we could probably separate, if we could separate the fire marshal's office or the fire marshal from CRR, I would love to, because it's community risk reduction is an organization, a whole organization concept, because the director of community risk reduction is the fire chief. It's not the fire marshal. The fire chief is your director of community risk reduction, and you look at the whole organization and figure out what is it that we should be doing for our community, and really, even more better, if that's a word, what is it that we should not be doing for our community? Because not everybody needs us, not everybody wants us, and not every program that you may do in Brighton is going to work in the city of Charlottesville. So so that's my take on community risk reduction. It's the you look at what CPSE did. The Center for Public Safety Excellence is the umbrella over the Commission of Fire Accreditation International. From an accreditation standpoint, they no longer call fire suppression, hazmat, and tech rescue and public education. They don't call those things programs anymore. They call it community risk reduction, because from fire suppression to technical rescue to hazmat to public education, all of that has potential impacts to reduce the risk in the community. So let's call it what it is.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing, I'm sure you see this in some of the classes nowadays too. Our CRR programs, when I'm at conferences, they're getting more and more full, because I think our line officers, our battalion chiefs, our fire chiefs are understanding that, holy cow, this is a powerful tool in reducing our call volume, prioritizing resources, and it's not just stickers and smoke alarms. Right?
Oh, yeah.
This is, and it's resonating in City Hall. It's resonating at the police department. I think we're finding, for a lot of us, right, we rely on the public for our funding. And when you have those partnerships in place, it's making a big difference. But I'll give you probably a good example, and you can respond, but you get that hoarder house, or you get this citizen that's in need. I think us as firefighters want to help, and it's more than us mowing their lawn, and it's more than us just pointing them to some resources. I know as a fire chief, I want our staff to be prepared so they can get back to when people are in need and pair them up with the right stuff, because all of those situations come back to us.
Oh, absolutely. So what will save our industry is community risk reduction. And I don't mean to say that our industry is spiraling out of control, and it's not. I think that we're in a solid place. However, in our city, we've if anybody Googles the city of Charlottesville, the first thing that they're going to see is the riots and the civil unrest of 2017. And that provides a lot of pressure on all of our city government, all of the departments, because we're gonna start to lose some funding, and we've seen it. COVID hits, and we start to lose even more funding because revenues are down. How do you start to show that the fire department is not a community liability and only responds to disasters, cleans up a disaster, and leaves the disaster far worse than what it was, when before we ever got there, right? How do we turn this into an investment? How do you change the tides, that when somebody thinks, the fire department's, the fire department is involved in this, they're no longer thinking emergency response and loss. Now they're thinking community investment. And you take a look at if you haven't ever read I'm sure Mike, you've read it, but if you haven't read the 21st Century Emergency Services White Paper, Fire and Emergency Services White Paper, Google it. It's on the cpse.org website, but I every time I want to pull up a copy of it, it's 21st Century Fire and Emergency Services white paper. They hit 8 critical issues that the fire service is going to face over the next 30 years. And every one of those, without exception, can be tied right back to community risk reduction. And, you look at even the ICMA paper back in the day when it was published in 2005 or 2006, I think. It's relatively old, about, the tough questions to ask your fire chief. You can answer all of those, by using concepts of community risk reduction and changing this into a liability and keeping your city manager or county manager from ever asking, those kind of questions,
So what would you say to a fire chief when you say, all right, let's just take our normal fire department, right? They're overrun on alarms, they're overrun on medical calls, they're understaffed, they're working like crazy, and their chief is trying to start. Where would you say, you want to start in CRR, or you want to start with an assessment? Here's where I'd go. What would you say is the first step?
Yeah. So I always call, when we talk about, I'm a big risk assessment fan, and I think that our city's our Charlottesville Fire Department's risk assessment is not the Charlottesville Fire Department risk assessment anymore. It's become the Charlottesville risk assessment, and it's the community's risk assessment. And I always call them a fruit basket, because we all have to start somewhere, sometime, right? So we had this empty basket, and the first thing that we stuck in there was an apple. And for us, the apple was cooking fires, because we thought we knew who was having cooking fires most often and where they were occurring. So, from a traditional fire prevention standpoint, let's look at something we all know. We know about cooking fires. So we do a risk assessment on cooking fires, and it is not at all what we thought it was going to be. So we were like, oh, let's keep going down the road. Let's talk about people getting hit by cars. And then we can continue to build this. And it's, none of us, there's a lot to say in developing something over 18 months. When I talked with folks at a firehouse table, and they hear these things about community risk reduction coming down the road, or they hear about stuff initiatives that we're pushing, I say 18 to 24 months we'll be fully on board with it. If we say that, oh yeah, we're going to start tomorrow, it's not going to happen. Oh yeah, we're going to have a robust risk assessment that drives, programs and services for our community, next week, next month, next year, it's not going to happen. We have to start small and start working through, adding a pear, a banana, some strawberries, whatever it is that you can stick in that fruit basket. All of a sudden, you have this big, robust fruit basket. But the analogy, I came up with this analogy on a stage doing a thing. I think I was at FRI when I did it. But I was like, but even the fruit has to be switched out, because it's going to go bad. So that's from a data standpoint. We have to take the fruit out and put new fruit in. We have to continually rotate it, or that risk assessment gets stale. It's difficult to have we've got a data analyst in our small department, and that's probably one of the better things that we've done. Back in probably, I think it was long before I got there, in 2017, maybe, is when they hired him. And that helps us understand, that we're providing reliable or valid data to our risk assessment. But, not everybody can have that. So sometimes it's all about sitting on a couch with a computer and figuring out what you can figure out. And, tools like Esri, most of the localities throughout the nation have access. Most of the fire departments have access to Esri products, and they don't even know that they have them. And Esri for us has been a game changer, because, during my interview, one of the things that I asked was like, hey, do we have Esri products, and what do we have access to? And we've taken our risk assessment years down the road, because of the partnerships we have with companies like Esri, and it doesn't cost us a penny at all. Oh, actually, no, it cost me $150 a year for a license for what's called community analyst, because we've got these 19. So the next step for us was that I found, as we're building that fruit basket, I found out that we had 19 established neighborhoods in the city, because people wanted to know where the potholes and the sidewalk projects were happening most often. So they divided the city up into 19 neighborhoods. So now our risk assessment is not based on fire department response zones. It's all based on community neighborhoods. Some of them are as small as less than 1/10 of a square mile. Some of them are as big as 1.2 square miles. But it's 19 neighborhoods inside of 10 square miles. So it gets very, very granular. But we've developed we've developed a fruit basket for every one of those neighborhoods, and it really starts to paint the picture, tell the story, identify the risks, and that's where, like, University of Virginia's health system is taking our risk assessment there, and they're looking at it and they're like, oh, we thought we would put community health workers in these two neighborhoods. What this is showing that we need community health workers in these other two neighborhoods first as a pilot project. So, and that's where, if we can get that risk assessment built big enough, then other people start to use it. And then all of a sudden you start getting other people's data, and it drives more efficiencies within our government.
So yeah, Joe, so one of the things that I think we see is, like, especially as a leader, implementing change, some of the CRA and how we look at things and data, and diving deeper into not just saying, hey, that area has a fire problem, those buildings have false alarm problems, is right. We know that there's power in data that comes from ours, as well as the people we work with and partner with, mashing it all together. But really, in a very simple way, is we may not have all the details, and as leaders, we just got to keep talking about this to the right people, to all the people, and then listen, because we're going to get a lot of feedback back. Were you seeing much from a leadership perspective? There had to be some skepticism with you coming in.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was interesting because you go back and look at news articles. We were having a huge staffing problem in Charlottesville, and had a lot of conflict between the fire department and the city manager's office. And when I got hired, there was a news article about the fact that we couldn't hire more firefighters, but we can hire a deputy chief. So it started off immediately kind of going down some other pathways. But the skepticism and it's not fear, but it's firefighters don't like change, right? And we can have all of the different funny things that we say about that, but the firefighters like change, and they like change when they understand why we're changing. So we started from our standpoint, from a community risk reduction standpoint, I went right to the firehouse tables and met with every shift, every engine company, or every company at every station, and had very specific conversations about what community risk reduction is, like we talked about at the beginning of this, and how this is going to impact you as a firefighter. And we laid out these huge maps on the table of the whole city. I'm like, listen, tell me what the risks are in the city. And they're like, well, I don't know what you mean. Tell me what target hazards are, or risks. And I did it 9 different times, because again, a small department. But 9 different times, 9 different paper maps with 9 completely different approaches to identifying risk, and it was awesome. We had a whole map of risk of just of our mid-mount tower getting in and out of areas, and access, and cars, and tight streets, and we had a whole map of that. And I took all of it and started dumping it into to GIS, and I developed a really easy dashboard that they can click on an iPad sitting in their station, which is how we try to deploy target solutions. And we started fixing stuff, and we're like, this is what it's all about. Is like, you're identifying what you perceive as hazards and risks, and we're going to start trying to reduce those risks by having those conversations with other departments, because we can't fix parking, but we can work on street improvements down the road. One of the greatest we've got a lot of really good partnerships now, but one of the really cool partnerships recently was with the UVA School of Data Science. We heard that they were looking for projects for their master's level capstone students. And I reached out, and I was like, listen, this is what I want to do. And there was almost immediately zero interest in the UVA academics working with us. And it was like, every time I said something, it was just crickets. And I was like, all right, I need to take another approach. So I shared my screen. We pulled up our risk assessment. And it was probably, in its adolescent stage. It wasn't quite big yet. And we started having a conversation around the data that we currently have and where we want to take it. And immediately they were on board. And we got, UVA charges $15,000 per team to work outside of UVA. I was like, I don't have any money. And we got 2 teams for free. And it was the first time they'd ever stuck 2 teams on the same organization. And so we were pretty excited. So they one team worked on racial inequities or some inclusion and diversity topics based on how we're developing, we're administering medications, or we're responses, or our slow responses or fast responses. The other one just looked at fire problems, or response problems, and who in which neighborhoods are seeing different things occur. And that was huge for us, because now we took a dumb firefighter like me dumping stuff into an Excel document because my data analyst is way too busy, and trying to parse it out by neighborhood. Now we've got like real data scientists working on stuff, and both of those teams have developed them into like chain capstones, which that means that it goes, this year those teams worked on it. Next year, they've already developed a plan for the next two teams to come in and work on it some more. And they're going to continue kicking this can farther and farther down the road, which benefits us, and we're not paying a thing for it. And they're using it as a community project. We're using it, and we're telling how great UVA is. And hey, students, come let your parents spend money here. It's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity, especially if it's real close. I think, right, this is, how many times in your career have you not reached out to somebody else because they weren't fire service, right? Or something, we just didn't think. Well, that's probably a bad term. We did think, but maybe we thought we had the talent inside, or the data just didn't exist.
Oh, yeah. I've got this great infographic of like, most of my presentations have no words on it because, I don't like reading words off of a slide, but it's got little bathroom figures, right? And that's how I show firefighters or the community or something. And they're inside of a little box, and they've got this great idea, but all these people outside have so much better ideas. And everybody, I think, overuses the word silos, that we always work within silos. And that's what we do, because you don't wear a badge, you don't understand what we need. Until we can get by, past that as an industry, we're always going to be kind of, held back, because, social services, mental health, I developed this whole, I call it a mind map. I don't even know what it is, but it's all of our partnerships. 40 some partnerships are on this map. And the closer they are to the center, the better relationship we have with them. And on the periphery are all the ones I just bought coffee for, last week, and we're starting to pull them in. Meals on Wheels for us is going to be really cool, because, they're providing us feedback now of hoarding houses, people that aren't going to be able to self-rescue. And they're doing that, through a really simple app that we developed. But they're going to start, they haven't told them yet, but we're going to start providing them every other month with whatever the hot topic is that we need folks. Don't put gasoline in a kerosene heater when it's cold outside. Don't bring your generator inside and run it in a garage, because that's a really bad idea. And we can develop all of that, stick it in the Meals on Wheels packets, and they're being delivered to somebody's hand, several hundred in the city every day. So that's the kind of partnerships that we need to leverage. And it's all about buying coffee and starting that conversation.
Yeah, that's one thing. It is so easy, right? One of the things that has benefited me professionally is buying lunch, buying coffee.
Yeah.
Out of the fire station, meeting with peers, meeting with host agencies, EMS. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter, because so many times it just gave me better perspective of the community we're serving. Mm-hmm. It gave me better perspective of who's out there. And I like coffee. You can see I'm drinking it today.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times when fire departments start this, we put a posting out. We say, hey, look, we're hiring a CRR specialist. And we get a lot of, I think if you've been in the fire business long enough, you've seen an overzealous fire prevention officer. Mm-hmm. They're perfect for the job, but they just can't get it done, or they're running into struggles with their leadership. The bosses think, hey, this is something we've got to do, and they're hitting a wall, not making movement, or they're not in sync. Is probably a big thing that I see with a lot of peers. When you think through what would you say to if somebody's like a lieutenant, a captain, you're in a different part, you're up in the top, you're up in the high food chain with direct access to the chief. How do you help manage this if you were a young officer kind of running into walls, you don't have full support of leadership? What would you say?
start taking those baby steps, and start developing your own fruit basket. Because, if you're a young officer and you're riding an engine company and you have a district that you're responsible for that day, right? So that's a perfect opportunity to start having a conversation with your crews, with the offgoing crew, with the oncoming crew, about the things that are happening in the neighborhood, and figuring out what it is that we can do to stop those things from happening. If it's even from a frequent utilizer standpoint, a frequent 911 utilizer standpoint, the problem typically isn't that they need an ambulance, or a fire truck. The problem is several layers into that onion before you kind of figure it out. And that's the kind of first steps that you can take. If you, everybody's submitting information into some sort of records management system. Sit back one day after dinner and, with a bowl of ice cream and start figuring out, well, what is happening in my response district, when I'm working and when I'm not working. And what is it that what project can I give my rookie who needs something to manage his time? What is it that we can start to develop for our community that we're responsible for? And then you start to get headway, because now your captain, your battalion chief, your district chief or deputy chief starts to see what you're doing in that community, and then it starts to spread. The 18 to 24 months, we can't start any of these things. And I never say a CRR program, because that's not what it is. We can do community risk reduction activities. We can have a community risk reduction mindset, but we don't have a community risk reduction program, because our community risk reduction program is the fire department. And if we start looking at the things that are happening around us, because what happens to our company officers in Charlottesville is not at all the same as what happens in Henrico County, in Brighton, in San Diego, wherever. Our problems are unique. They may be similar to other people, but our problems are unique, and we all have to understand that a blanketed program for a entire city is never going to work, nor is a program that somebody else just sent us and we jumped in it. That's why it's not a program; it's an activity. It's the change in the behaviors of our firefighters and our officers to get the job done for their community that they protect.
So if somebody was looking for resources, where would you point them?
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff. So I mean, it's the middle to end of January right now. So it's CRR week. So crrweek.org is a great place to get some really short, podcasts and videos of a lot of different people talking about this kind of stuff. It hits on all of the E's of community risk reduction and gets you kind of a little bit farther down the road. Strategicfire.org, there's Vision 2020. We're very familiar with Vision 2020. The mothers and fathers of community risk reduction that fostered that baby and got it going back in the early or mid 2000s, developed Vision 2020, and that's how it's kind of kept going down the road. So if you get into the Vision 2020 or strategicfire.org's toolbox, there's all kinds of stuff in there that you can start diving into. They've got door hangers for activities that you want to go out in a couple different languages, where you can just drop your logo on it. If you're in an accredited department, the Commission on Fire Accreditation International, their whole self-assessment is really starting to go, is wrap around, community risk reduction. And then, podcasts like this, the more we listen to other people's perspectives, not everybody agrees with the way that I see community risk reduction. And, and I'm sure that not everybody agrees with how, Chief O'Brien, has a perspective on, all of the stuff that you do. But it's good that all of us to have a different perspective, because then, we can start to understand that, things may be a little different than what we think. And, things probably are very different than what I think, but, I like talking about community risk reduction.
And I think that's a good perspective. Somebody said, where do you start? And I said, real quick, next time you update all the job descriptions, start sneaking it in.
Yeah. So, that's one of the, so there's two things real quick. So from another resource, like I said earlier, Esri is a great partner with so many localities in the fire department. Esri, because it doesn't cost us anything, because your locality is typically paying it through that ELA, there's solutions, pre-built solutions within Esri's products that you have access to right now. And everything from risk assessment. They have a great target hazard analysis that will take every building in your jurisdiction and apply a hazard to it, a hazard score to it, which is amazing. And it works really, really well. So you were talking about the job descriptions, and sorry, this is why I've got bad ADD. You were talking about the job descriptions. I was in Tennessee last month or the month before last, and somebody asked about, they raised their hand and asked about, well, we're a small volunteer department. We can't do that. We don't have the staffing. We have a hard enough time recruiting for firefighters. I was like, well, maybe you're recruiting for the wrong kind of firefighter. We are all firefighters. Paula that pays all of our bills and is a great administrative support. She's saving lives every day because of the things that she does. And I consider her a firefighter, and I consider, I'm just as much of a firefighter as she is, because I don't run a call, very often at all. I don't ride a fire truck. So from a volunteer standpoint, maybe it's time for us to start looking at how we recruit and who we recruit, because not everybody needs to be able to go into a burning building. There's a lot of need for what happens before that fire ever starts, or that person ever chokes, or that person ever gets diabetes. So there's lots of opportunities to recruit differently.
And so many times we just pile it in a small group. I got to use the right phrase. I'm working on this organization is going to work on being accredited. We're an applicant. They're diving in, and our accreditation manager has solicited for a team, and it's so cool to see, because we now have like 7 bodies, really good people that work for us from all different likes. They're starting to go through training. They're starting to read, they're starting to work through it. And I love seeing that new involvement of looking underneath the hood, coming back, asking us for stuff as they're trying to build, and prepare. And I think CRR can be that same thing, right? There are plenty of people willing to support your organization. And I always joke with, everybody wants to fix the false alarm issue. And I think there's an enforcement issue. I think there's an education issue, right? But in the simplest form, drive down your data and then take it to police and see if they have the same issue in the same locations, right?
Oh, absolutely.
How simple is that, right? And then you form a partnership. And that is just something, without diving too deep, but how many times are our fire trucks out of position, our police cars are out of position, responding to alarms that shouldn't have ever happened? But and who knows where that blossoms into, right? But I love your analogy at 18 to 24 months, because as a young fire chief, I bet you I thought I could change this department in 6 months. And you can't.
Yeah. Everything's 18 to 24 months. Even if it's been 18 to 24 months for the past 18 months, there so many of the initiatives and the things that we've started over the last, really over the last 24 months, are starting to blossom now, and you're starting to see real outcomes and real outputs. And, because we're not jamming it down, down the pipe so hard, it's accepted, and people are doing it, and it's amazing to watch. So 18 to 24 months is the only timeline you'll ever get from me.
That's what they're saying it takes right now to make a fire truck or an ambulance. So 18 to 24 months, they're following.
Exactly. Yeah. And it'll take 18 to 24 months to find all the things that are wrong with it once you get delivered.
Joe, you're very accessible. If people want to catch up with you outside of this, how should they find you?
Yeah, grab me on LinkedIn. I think that's the easiest place to find me. And I would give you my email address, but you never know what happens, and we always everybody sees opportunities down the road. But yeah, LinkedIn, I think it's Joe Powers MPA is the handle. I don't have my cool little handle of my Twitter because I don't do Twitter that often. But Joe Powers. I think it's Joe Powers MPA is what I am. So and I have a picture that looks just like this.
Just like it. Maybe more professional.
I really need to change it and be something else. But yeah.
Well, thanks for your time today, Joe. I think this was a great topic. I know that, right, I think you overlooked and stated probably patience, tenacity, natural curiosity. I mean, you have definitely made us all level up. I've enjoyed working with you in the section and in so many ways. And I truly appreciate your time today. Hope everybody takes time to like, subscribe, share this with your friends, and email, because we want to keep getting the word out. What Joe's talking about is really one of the future parts of this business. And I don't want to just say fire, because we're changing every day. So thanks, Joe. Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.